Hello and welcome to the show in my son's kitchen in Scotland. So all is chaos on here. There's 4 boys and a huge dog. Oh, and it gets worse because I've got a reverb. So why do I have a reverb, people? So let's be bouncing to the studio. So Marty BFP is here, so that's good. Marty, can you tell me, are you hearing a reverb too? I really don't want that. Why am I hearing a reverb? Let's remove that. No, I don't want to remove that. That won't work at all. Yes, Marty's here in the reverb, as is Mitch Cameron, very slightly on that end. Now, why is this? So I'm doing this on my laptop instead of the normal PC. The unfamiliar surroundings are not a problem for me. Have we now got rid of the reverb? If so, why? Right, can someone tell me, can you still hear me? Can you see me okay? And is there a reverb? So, can you hear me? And can you see me? Someone tell me, come along. Someone on the show, Marty, Mitch, Krista, Kit. Can see and hear fine. Excellent. Thank you, Kit Bear. Brilliant. No reverb, right? No, I've got rid of that as well. So that's good, isn't it? Quite remarkable. Don't know what that was all about. Anyway, I've got various things for you on the show today. Now, first of all, as you know, the regulars especially, I often speak on this show and others about the appalling wrongs done with the Zionists and with the Talmud fanaticists and about forbidden history and about the Israeli Zionist lobby, and I don't pull my punches. But I want to talk today about a good rabbi, and I mean this absolutely genuinely. I'm not mocking or anything here, because a lot of people, they come and say, it's all the Jews, all of them. Well, as I've said before, it's not. But just by way of showing that, I want to share this fascinating piece with you. Now, where have we got? The Good Rabbi. Here we go. So this is a piece from the Times of Israel. So it's absolutely kosher source. And it's a long X post, actually. It's just the heading of it. Yesterday, Rabbi Yehuda Gilad visited the West Bank, that's occupied Palestine, and wrote the statement below, provided in our translation. And the good rabbi says this, and it really should be an eye-opener, primarily actually for those people, Christian Zionists, etc., who believe these people can do no wrong. But also, it should be an eye-opener for those people who believe that these people can do no right. So I'm going to read you the whole thing because I think this is really important. Rabbi Yehuda Gilad, head of the Yeshivat Gilboa, visited Kiryat Humza on the West Bank following a settler pogrom in which a 29-year-old Palestinian farmer was sexually assaulted, his family beaten, and hundreds of his sheep were stolen. And this is the letter from the rabbi. Yesterday, I went through a very difficult and deeply disturbing experience. I visited Kiryat Humza, 30-mile drive from our yeshiva, where a pogrom carried out by Hilltop youth took place about a week ago. Now, Nick Griffin interrupts here to tell you that the Hilltop youth are a large body, massively financed by from the United States, financed by the same people as financed Tommy Robinson and co. And the far right rabbi who Tommy ran around with some years ago was closely associated with these Hilltop youth terrorists. Right, that's an end of Nick Griffin. I'm back to the rabbi who says this. In the early hours of the night, a group of rioters, 30 to 40 people, arrived, equipped with sticks and many zip ties. They bound the men and apparently also 2 foreign volunteers, though I'm not certain of this, and then beat them all over their bodies with fists and clubs. We saw many remnants of the zip ties on the ground. The men required treatment at the hospital in Afula for injuries of varying severity. At the same time, the attackers stole the entire herd, about 300 head, belonging to the few families living there under unimaginable conditions of poverty. I heard directly from a young man, a first-hand witness, what had happened there. From his face, the blue bruise in his eye, and his sorrowful expression, it was clear he was telling the truth. In the same conversation, with the help of a translator, he described in detail the prolonged abuse they endured while bound. Then, with deep shame, he told us something I had previously found impossible to believe. I find it difficult. My hands tremble as I write this about Jews, and yet I will write it because I am convinced it indeed happened. Yes, these wicked individuals bound his genitals in an extremely painful way, not to mention the humiliation involved. These events recall the pogroms our ancestors endured in various diasporas. Have we become like the worst of the nations? I want to turn to the question, what should be done? But I feel that I'm still at the stage of crying out, alas, what has become of us? Get rid of the picture. So, those are the words of a righteous rabbi trying to tell the world, but in the end only telling people in Israel, because the Western media will not cover these things, about the appalling crimes. This isn't as appalling as the genocide in Gaza, obviously, but still an appalling crime being committed against the Palestinians in the West Bank, who I remind you again and again and again include Christians as well as Muslims. But even if they're all Muslims, it's their land. And yet these settlers, with the full connivance most of the time of the Zionist government, because they want to force all the Palestinians out of the West Bank, just as they do out of Gaza, as they want to push the Lebanese out of Lebanon, as they want to push half the Iraqis out of half of Iraq, as they want to go down into the fortunately empty deserts of Saudi Arabia, as they want to take all of Egypt up to the Nile and turn it into a greater Israel. That's why these settlers, that's just the next stage of the process. But there's at least one good rabbi speaking out about it. And God bless that man. Right. Now, what's going on in Israel, Palestine, is so appalling. And what's going on likewise with the Netanyahu Purim war in Iran and still the slaughter in Gaza is so appalling that even people who've been so far sickeningly pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, are beginning to wake up. And one man I want to talk about now is Rod Dreher. Now, I've spoken about Rod in the past. He's this chap. Now, he is an American Christian who's converted, I believe, to Orthodoxy, and he now lives most of the time in Hungary, where he runs around with Viktor Orban and all the rest of it. He's a well-known right-wing political commentator and a staunch pro-Zionist, or he has been up until recently. But he wrote this the other day. The actions, and this is just one of a series of things he's written recently, saying, I still support Israel, but it's becoming really difficult. He wrote, the actions of Jerusalem police over the weekend were so insanely frustrating. This, bear in mind, is Palm Sunday weekend. If you haven't heard, they forbade Cardinal Pizzabella, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, that is the leader of the Holy Land's Roman Catholics, from entering the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on Palm Sunday to celebrate the Mass. So let's just get rid of Rod there, because you know what he looks like anyway. Hang on. Let me just dive in with the way and check you're still hearing this. So, yeah, obviously so from your comments. Thanks, folks. Good to see you in here, Ivan Cooper, as well. Yep, the rest I've mentioned already. So go back into this. And Rod Dreher continues in his writing on Substack just the other day. As you will recall, Israel closed off all the holy sites of all religions for the time being for safety's sake. Now, at this point, Rod loses it again because, well, he says this. This makes sense, given that the Iranians had targeted the old city, the most important church in Christendom, full of Christians celebrating the holiest days of the year, would be a tempting target for the Iranians. Now, what planet is this man on? The Iranians have Christians in Iran. Yes, they're a minority, but they are protected to the point that they have seats guaranteed to them in the Iranian parliament. And the Christians of Iran, just like the Jews of Iran, are extremely loyal to the Iranian government. Simple as that. Now, you might say, oh, well, they're forced to be or something like that. But even if that was the case, then the Iranians make a show being kind to the Christians. Why on earth would they kill, especially given the fact that they know that they're up against an enormously powerful propaganda machine? Why on earth would anyone, let alone the actually supposedly intelligent Rod Dreher, believe that the Iranians would target Christians deliberately in Jerusalem? He goes on to say, besides which, as a Christian who's prayed at this site, built over the hill on which Jesus died and the tomb from which he rose to life, I do not want to see it blown up by Shia zealots. Oh, come on, Mr. Dreher. Are you a moron? A total ignorant moron? Or are you lying? Because you should know perfectly well that the Shia, and actually the Sunni as well, revere Jesus as a prophet, and they revere his mother, Mary. Unlike the Talmudists, with whom, Rod Dreher, you, for some incredible reason, make common cause, who believe that Mary was a whore and that Jesus burns in hell forever in a giant vat of boiling human excrement. That's what they think of our Saviour. Whereas the Shia, especially the Zealots, and the Sunni, especially the Zealots, worship Jesus as a prophet. Now, it's not good enough because they worship him. They believe that he died. So he was a prophet, he was crucified, and he died. So they deny he's the Son of God. So they're doomed. We all know that. Fair enough. But they revere him as a prophet. And the idea they would blow up the hill on which he died is utter pathetic nonsense, Rod Dreher. It really is. It's staggering. Ignorance or cowardice. Now, which is it? Is it? It's one more thing, actually. It's ignorance, cowardice, or greed. So I'd love to hear from Rod Dreher or anyone who knows him. Is it the cowardice shown by Peter? So good men can be cowards. When he denied the Lord until the cock crowed thrice. So if that's the case, Rod Dreher at any moment can stand up like Peter did in the end and say, yes, I believe and this is the truth. Or is it greed? Is this, as we're in Holy Week, is this actually about Rod Dreher finding it very, very convenient to go along with these Zionist lies and Christian Zionist lies? Because, like Judas in this week, he takes the 30 pieces of silver. Or is he just plain ignorant? I do not know, but it makes me very angry because so many other things that Rod Dreher writes, like the Benedict option, for instance, are so good. So it's good to see him criticising the Zionist regime and the military. And after those absurdities, he went on to say this: it is impossible to understand why a cardinal, so he's saying it's okay to keep out a large number of Christians. But then he says, it is impossible to understand why a cardinal and a small group of priests should be denied access on Palm Sunday. Yes, it is perhaps impossible to understand if you ignore the fact that the Talmudists and the Jewish settlers and the Israeli government, especially the Netanyahu gang, hate Jesus Christ and they hate Christians. When you know that, it all becomes clear. So as it's Holy Week, we need to try and turn our mind to good things and so on. I ask you to pray that whatever Rod Dreher is at present, whether he's a coward, whether he's greedy, whatever it is, or whether he's ignorant, pray tonight sometime before you go to bed that Rod Dreher wakes up and that he speaks out because he has the ears of a lot of people, and it would be a very, very good thing. So pray that Rod Dreher is a Peter and not a Judas, and that he does, in the end, summon up the courage to speak out. Right, let me dive into the chat for a minute and see what you think of that. Oh, thank you, Ivan. Ivan Cooper says, do not forget to subscribe to Nick's Substack. Only cost of a Starbucks every month. That's very true. And there is no froth. No froth, no foam, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Right. Yes, Kit Bear, you're right. It was an act of contempt and of provocation, but I think mainly of contempt and a fair bit of hatred as well. That's the way these things are. Right then, I want to move on to still sticking with the Iran war, because it is so important. If it doesn't end the world, then it certainly ended the comfort of the world that we're used to. It really has. And if the final madness of blowing up the hello there, just got a guest come in. If the final madness of blowing up the whole of Karg Island and the Iranian oil industry is carried out, and Mr. Trump swings from one to another. Why does Mr. Trump swing from one to another? Well, either because he's completely mad or because he's not mad. It could well be that it's because the people very close to Mr. Trump, given that they know what he's going to say in 15 minutes, can place enormous bets on the stock market and on oil futures. And then when Trump's words cause things to crash or to leap, either way, they make very large sums of money. And if one way or another, even if it's not Trump, if it's the Israelis, whoever it is that causes the destruction of the Iranian oil industry, and as Trump has threatened, of their desalination plants, whereupon the Israelis do the same to the rest of the Gulf, at that point, whatever anyone says from there on, the world has lost 25-30% of its hydrocarbons. America has lost all the petrodollar recycling mechanism that keeps America up, and there will be the mother of all stock market crashes, like catastrophe. And people will lose their shirts, people will lose their pensions, and anyone with a really large sum of cash made over the last few weeks by speculating when you know what's going to happen in terms of the verbiage, anyone with a large pile of cash at that point can leap in and buy up all the stocks of companies at rock bottom, fire sale prices, especially knowing which companies this same government is going to give the big contracts to when it comes to rebuilding things. So this is part of a vast looting operation that's going on. So that's what I think is going on when a Trump appears to be mad. But of course, he could be mad. We're not sure. So let's say there's several possibilities. There's actually three, and then which you'll probably know about, and a fourth I want to tell you about. The first possibility is that Trump is an insane megalomaniac surrounded by crooks who are simply getting rich through insider trading, as I've just described. Option two, Trump's been fooled or bribed or blackmailed by Netanyahu into going into war, taking America into war against all his pledges for greater Israel. Option three, Trump is just a patsy for the World Economic Forum. He is, after all, the man who enforced those wonderful untested vaccines on America and boasted about it. So he's a patsy for the WEF, which undoubtedly sees the Gulf energy crisis as an even better way than COVID to shrink our carbon footprint and advance their Agenda 2030 depopulation plan. And broadly speaking, those are the three reasons which people are saying it's one, two, or three. Now, actually, of course, it can be a combination. They're not mutually exclusive. The World Economic Forum does exist. It does want to use lockdowns and enforced energy scarcity to grind us into poverty. It does. And that's at the very, very least. The Zionist lobby is immensely powerful. Even people in favor of the war are saying, basically, in American terms, we were dragged into it by the Israeli lobby. So all those things are true. And basically, you've got different elites or factions of an elite squabbling and so on, but generally pushing in the same direction. But it's also possible, I would say, there's a fourth possibility, that what's going on is actually a purely materialistic, very practical, cynical, coldly calculated response of the American financial, military, industrial elite, the great powers of America, to problems that they can see coming, but they can't stop. And to understand what this is, you have to start with the petrodollar. Now, the petrodollar was created primarily by Henry Kissinger in 1973 at the end of the oil crisis of 73, when the United States backed Israel in the Yom Kippur War in October that year. And in response, Saudi Arabia and the Arabs embargoed the United States and its allies for oil, forcing up the price of oil from $3 a barrel to a staggering $12 a barrel. Cue economic disaster and catastrophe. This wasn't because things had been destroyed. It was just a political decision, so it could be reversed. So along came Henry Kissinger, who, for all his faults, was a very clever man, and he worked out a deal with the Saudis, with the Arab sheikhs as well. And in simple terms, America would provide the military support to keep the corrupt and actually Wahhabi, fanatic Islamist House of Saud in power. In return, the Saudis would price their oil, and the rest of the world followed suit, because if they didn't, the Americans were going to bomb them into submission. They priced this oil in American dollars. So since 1973 until quite recently, every barrel of oil sold on the planet was priced in dollars. You actually had to pay in dollars. So wherever you are in the world, how do you get dollars? You either have to sell things to America, but America in the 70s was making everything it needed, really. So you either sell things to America or you have to buy dollars. So the Federal Reserve, which I remind Americans especially, is a private bank. There's nothing federal about the Federal Reserve. It's owned by the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, a clique of banking families. It's not yours at all. But they print the dollars and the rest of the world buys them, or rather takes them and sends goods in exchange. So if worthless paper goes out, goods and money comes back in. And this petrodollar recycling operation is the entire basis of the last 50 years of American prosperity. And despite the growing poverty in many parts of America, by historical comparisons, it's an enormously wealthy place. It's also the sole basis of American power. Just like Rome, when they couldn't pay the legions any more gold, when the silver mines of Spain were flooded, that was it. It collapsed because they couldn't pay the legions and their military power stopped. Well, likewise, if the petrodollar operation stops, America's military might collapses because it can't afford to pay or do anything. So for 50 years, the Americans have kept this going. Everyone in the world wanting to buy oil had to buy dollars. And anyone who tried to sell their oil in something else, well, Gaddafi tried that. He literally got a sharp bayonet somewhere it was really, really painful. Saddam Hussein tried it and they slow hanged him in a prison. Maduro tried it in Venezuela more recently, and he's now rotting in an American prison hellhole. So that's the way it goes. But, and here's the really interesting thing, which I think tells us at least a big part of what's going on. In recent years, it hasn't just been little Libya or little Iraq, basically saying, we're not playing this game anymore. We're going to buy in our own currency, or we're going to barter things. It's been big powers. So last year, Venezuela, a little power, started selling its oil to China in yuan. So Venezuela had to go. But Russia sells its oil for gold and for rubles. Iran is now insisting on it, sorry. And it's getting more and more, and particularly the fact that China is such a massively powerful state in every possible way that it is not possible for America to keep the petrodollar going for very much longer. It's simple as that. It cannot be done. Now, the people running America, these people with vast sums of money in control of huge corporations, they're many things. They're very corrupt. They're very wicked. They're very greedy. They worship Mammon. But they are not stupid. They know these things. They have massively advanced systems for working out what's coming next and so on. And they will have known several years ago that the petrodollar is on its last legs, and thereby their power in America and over the world. So what would they do? Their global hegemony is over. Well, when you're in a position like that, you can either keep on pretending it's going to be all right and pretending you can get a magic wand and wave it. This is in right-wing nationalist terms, this is exactly the same as what the people who say remigration are doing, pretending that a fantasy political solution which no one who can attain power will ever put in, and which cannot be done in any case, is going to save them, because they can't face the reality that the system, the thing that they've got on with, that they're used to, cannot be restored. And that's what's going on here. The petrodollar cannot be restored, and the sensible people running the big powers in the United States know this, and they've accepted it. So what I believe is going on is that they've decided we can't save the petrodollar. That means that America and our power and everything's finished. It's going to be a disaster. America in poverty will probably descend into civil war. We'll be lucky to escape not being hung from lampposts. What are we going to do? Well, stop trying to save something that can't be saved. Stop trying to maintain American hegemony over the whole world and retrench. Think a little bit smaller and concentrate on saving the capitalist finance system in America and securing US hegemony over enough of the world to keep things going. And I think they can do that, because if you think of North America as a whole, you've got the tar sands of Canada, you've got the liquid natural gas from fracking, you've got the light oil for petrol from the conventional US oil fields, and add in Venezuela and you've got heavy oil, and heavy oil is what you need to make diesel. But the only way in which the Venezuelan oil, because it's so heavy, is actually really a particular value is if there's a dire world shortage of diesel. Likewise, the liquid natural gas that's produced by fracking is a very expensive system. Unless prices are high, fracking companies don't make any money. Fracking has succeeded primarily because suckers have been persuaded to pour money into investing in it, because there's a crock of gold down there with all that oil and gas, rather than by producing profits. It only produces a profit if it's sold at a high price. So the genius of persuading Europe to commit suicide by Russia and stop buying Russian gas was, as a result, Britain and Holland and all sorts of other countries are buying large amounts of United States liquefied natural gas at 3 or 4 times the price they would have paid the Russians. So that's pushed the fracking industry of America into big, big profit. But even bigger profits if the Gulf liquid natural gas produced mainly by Qatar and sent around the world and the Gulf diesel are destroyed. The actual resources in the ground won't be destroyed, but everything above ground is going to be flattened and obliterated, and the tankers sunk as well, so it can't get out. So at that point, the oil of the entire new world becomes hugely valuable. And also at that point, the rest of the world, including China, is in serious trouble, because large amounts of their energy comes from the Middle East. And if the Middle Eastern hydrocarbon fields are wrecked, they're not going to get it. Cue crisis for them. Now, the Chinese are well aware of this. They have been for this for years. That's why they're so intensely focused on electrification of everything, especially transport. So they haven't got much oil or gas, very little. They've got lots of coal. They've got nuclear technology as well. And they're electrifying everything. It's why they're streets ahead of the West now in electric cars. They are far better. They're far more efficient, because they're pouring their resources into electrification, not because they've swallowed the tales about climate change and so on, but because if they stick using oil and gas, they had to import it from the Middle East, from client states of the United States. So they're trying to wean themselves off it. In another 10 years, they'll basically have done it. But at present, China is still quite vulnerable. And the not just blockading, but the destruction of the oil and gas reserve systems of the Gulf states will hit China massively hard. So, very simply, the US had a choice. Unavoidable petrodollar collapse, leading to full-scale collapse and probably civil war at home, or a rapid shift to something completely new. Now, if you're American, you might be thinking, well, I hope that's what's going on, because actually that probably sounds quite sensible. Yeah. I don't like the petrodollar recycling thing. I know about the Federal Reserve. Get away from that. It'd be a good thing. Well, sorry, this plan, my friends, is not for you. Not at all. What it's about, more than anything else, is this. Right. The technate of North America, showing USA, Mexico, Greenland, Panama, the Panama Canal, and the Gulf of Mexico. And, of course, Venezuela. So unimportant at the time, it wasn't mentioned, but very important now. And if you think back to what Mr. Trump has been doing in recent months, well, top right on that map, you've got Greenland. Down the bottom, you've got Venezuela. Pretty much in the middle, towards the top, you've got Canada. And all of those he's either taken or said he is going to take. So, quite a big thing. Now, this map, it's not some fiction. It's not actually about Mr. Trump. This is the map of the technate of America, which was created by Technocracy Inc., the Technocracy movement, which was enormously powerful alternative political party, very, very popular, hundreds of thousands of members in Canada and North America in the 1930s and into 1940. And this map was produced in 1940 of the technate of America. Now, my AI overview, which I looked up for this, found it with the map, says Technocracy Inc. The map proposes a unified North American superstate spanning from Greenland to the Panama Canal, covering Canada, the US, Mexico, and the Caribbean. This technocratic vision sought a self-sufficient region managed by engineers, replacing traditional politics with scientific expertise and a non-monetary, energy-based economic system. So this is post the collapse of the existing system. It's something new. And if perhaps you might be thinking, oh, it doesn't sound that bad, really. Replacing traditional politics with scientific expertise, that means that you lose even the shred of power and independence you're supposed to have, because you're no longer going to be ruled by a system designed by the founding fathers to try to be better than either kings or democracy, a republic. That is going to be replaced by something where Bill Gates and Elon Musk and people like them decide everything. They decide where you're going to be allowed to go, how much money you're going to be allowed to have, what you're going to be allowed to spend, if you are going to be allowed to marry, if you're going to be allowed to have children, if you're going to be allowed to live, all in the hands of a technocratic, plutocratic elite. Now, the founding fathers, I'm sure, would have had something very, very serious to say about that. And they'd have been right. Now, the problem with this is not just that, I come back to what Donald Trump is doing. See, if Donald Trump is just mad, then, or if he's just saying something so that the stock markets and the oil and gas prices lurch from one way to another, so his cronies can make money, then it's sort of okay. But if this is the plan, if the plan is to draw American power into something smaller, but still huge, half of the new world, and demolish the rest to keep their power up, to keep their economic might up by wrecking everybody else's, then it's brutally destructive for the whole world. And we here in Britain, especially, having just destroyed our own oil industry, having wrecked our industrial system, having wrecked our electricity, power generation system, having a mountain of debt, and having a total cretin like Keir Starmer and co. in charge, and the potential rivals just as bad, we're particularly exposed to this brutal destruction, which, if this is what's going on, whatever Trump says today or tomorrow, before America leaves the Middle East, America is going to have one more massive escalation, do enormous damage to Iran's electricity system, oil infrastructure, and desalination plants. And Iran will respond, and it's perfectly capable of doing so, and will have every right to do so, by a tit-for-tat attack on the installations of Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and turn the whole place into a burning desert with no water. That's what's going on. It's going to cause a global disaster, except for America. Oh, say the Americans, good stuff. No, because among the victims of this global disaster are going to be Middle America. The system, the people I'm talking about who run America in economic terms, do not do it for you. They don't do it for ordinary Americans. They do it for themselves. At the very, very most, they do it for their big shareholders, not for anybody else. And long before they went looting around the rest of the world, they looted ordinary Americans. The Great Depression was a bank-organized scam from the start to loot ordinary Americans, because up until that point, America had grown with free soil farmers. And the big powers didn't want that. They wanted cheap labor in the factories, and they wanted more and more of the farms of the good land to be gobbled up by their growing corporations. To reiterate, the system existed to loot Middle America, and it will loot Middle America, just as it does everybody else. And if they create this great crash, then the very first victims of it, apart from starving Africans and starving people in Asia, who will then become desperate refugees, flooding into and wrecking even further our countries, the first victims after them will be the family farmers. It'll be people who own their own homes but still have a debt to the banks. It'll be people with savings which will be obliterated, people with pensions which will be wiped out when the stock market crashes. You will own nothing, but if you're unhappy, you mustn't say anything, because remember that the same Donald Trump is in favor of digital ID and mass surveillance. Let me show you a picture of a particularly evil creature with whom Donald Trump is like that. Very, very close indeed. Here we are, Donald Trump and Peter Thiel, the homosexual owner of Palantir, one of the biggest and most powerful IT corporations in the world. And Palantir is developing the central database of every bit of information on every citizen in the United States, tied in with Homeland Security, tied in with the IRS. That's Peter Thiel. That's what he's developing. And he is working hand in glove with a man who thinks this is all wonderful. It's going to be a great, beautiful system. The man who imposed and boasted of untested, toxic vaccines, which have killed unknown numbers of people, Donald Trump. Now, the tragedy of this is that Trump could have delivered the MAGA revolution. He could have used all that money to rebuild America's industrial base, to sort out its infrastructure. He could have brought, with his power, he could have brought the banks and corporations to heel. He could have said, right, we're going to stop this monopolization. Private property is a good thing. So the more Americans that have private property, the better. Spread the good around. We need widespread private ownership, and we need private enterprise, not corporate monopoly. But he sold out to the vested interests, and he sold out to monopoly cronyism, and he sold out to the Israeli Zionist lobby. But if you only think it's the Zionist lobby, you're missing part of the point, and you're missing a lot of the danger. In the end, Trump has come down not just on the side of the Israel lobby, but also on the side of the techno tyranny, which is going to enslave and loot every single individual in the United States of America and Canada and Mexico and Venezuela, and not give a damn about the rest of us until the rest of us are in such a parlous state that from this core of what will by then be a very, very wealthy corporate America, They can say, you know what, there's lands in eastern England which look pretty good. We'll come out and we'll we'll restore Britain's shattered energy system, but we will take all your productive farmland as payment. And they'll do that to country after country after country. But they won't do it to the countries which line up with China. They won't do it to the countries that line up with Russia. And it's even looking like they won't manage to do it with Iran, because Iran is going to win this war, which Mr. Trump doesn't care because he's going to leave. And in winning, there will be chaos and disaster for everybody else. And that, I tell you, is what is going on. Hopefully I'm right. He's just mad. He will walk away, leaving everything there still intact, and all this will calm down. But honestly, if you believe that, I think you are rather dangerously naive. Right then, let me jump into the chat here and just see. Yeah, Andy Lighton sums it up perfectly. Trump's now the tech giant's Frankenstein's monster. Kit Bear, the US president is no different to the president of a corporation. Paul Telford, yes, indeed. Well, there are many. Actually, the only question is, who on earth do you go for when there's so many who deserve it? Mitch Cameron says, the future makes me so glad I'm old. I know what you mean, Mitch, but isn't it a fascinating time to be alive? And this whole thing, regardless of the individual conscious thoughts and aims and wicked ambitions of the men of enormous power, in the end, this thing is satanic. They've been offered, consciously or not, they've been offered by taken to the top of a huge mountain by Satan and told, all this can be yours. Now, Jesus, being the Son of God, says, no, thank you. Nope. But all these other suckers fall for it. So evil uses them. But in the end, since evil is real, so is good, so is God. And Satan is only a fallen angel. God is the creator of everything, including the fallen angels. So God and the good will emerge from this triumphant. As Ivan Cooper says, evil always self-destructs. Absolutely so. That's what's going on here. Better things will come out of this. Because if industrial civilization was so good, why have we murdered hundreds of millions of innocent babies? As you know, I don't believe in man-made climate change, but I do know that our world is full of pollutants and microplastics and all sorts of disasters, that we've wiped out huge numbers of beautiful animals and wildlife, while at the same time forcing hundreds of millions of our own people to live in grinding and disgusting poverty in the midst of plenty. That's industrial capitalism for you, folks. I'm not a communist, I'm a distributist. I believe private property is a really good thing. So good it should not be monopolised by a handful of the greediest, most evil bastards in the world. It needs sharing more widely. Not to everyone, whether they'll work or not, the opportunity to have independence, to be able to pass things on to your children, to have a decent life if you'll work for it. That's the important thing. And communism and finance capitalism, both of them take that away. It's why they're both rotten. To quote George Galloway, cheeks of the same arse. Right then, I did have a fantastic, really, really good end slate for you lined up. But because I'm miles from home and with quite an advanced, well, actually, it's a very advanced laptop, but I simply couldn't get the damn system to work. No way. So instead of that, I'm going to jabber on a bit longer and tell about something else. Because what I've just described Trump doing, selling out to the vested interests, betraying his base, that is what populists always do. Nationalists don't. Nationalists deliver. Or at least try to deliver. Populists always get elected by saying what the people want to hear and then doing what the rich want done. And that's Donald Trump. But it's not just him. It's also, I'm telling you, now here I'm going out on a limb, I'm going to say something which will upset some people, possibly even some people watching this show. I'm going to tell you that Rupert Lowe is a rotten, lying populist who is not going to save Britain and is actually there to help make things worse. Right? So now I'm going to say why, because that's rather provocative. Well, first of all, I've been saying for some weeks on Substack that it looks as though Rupert Lowe is staggeringly stupid because he's not going to win in 2029. He's just going to split the vote. And if he really wants to get somewhere, he could use the £2 million plus a year he's getting in on memberships alone, plus vast amounts in other donations and so on. And he's now an army of 120,000 people who want something to do. He could put them to work organising a hugely effective community-based organisation for Britain and the British and the English in particular. And on the back of that, in 2029, if Nigel Farage and co get elected, Lowe could then, after that, then be the leader. He'd be getting on a bit, but he would be the grand old man of a genuine, fantastic and increasingly powerful British nationalist movement, which could save this country. Perhaps not turn the clock back, but he could find ways through it. But he's not. Instead of that, he's saying, we're going to win in 2029. So I'm saying, is he stupid? Well, I've had to conclude now, no, Rupert Lowe isn't stupid. So I've done a bit of research into him. Now, he's not brilliant. He's 2 years older than me, and he got a place at Reading University. Now, I must admit that I didn't even know that Reading was a university back in the 1970s. Perhaps he went there, but later, I'm not sure. But anyway, he's got a science degree from Reading University. Now, there's no point being snobbish about it. In the end, all universities are rather similar. It's harder to get into Cambridge, which I did. It's hard to get into Oxford and Durham and so on. But you still got to have a certain brain. You have to have a number of O levels. You have to have 3 A levels in order to get, and he certainly did some years ago, in order to get into university. And it's easy in a university to read some Mickey Mouse subject, but a Bachelor of Science degree is a serious degree. So the man has a serious degree. He's also worked for Morgan Grenville, Deutsche Bank, Barings Bank. Now, I put them all up against the same wall, but you have to accept that the people who run banks are very good at what they're doing, which is making money, and at picking people who will help them make money. So you don't get to work for Morgan Grenville, Deutsche Bank and Barings Bank, and he wasn't there making the tea. You don't work for them unless you're quite good at your job. He's got huge investments in residential and commercial properties, stakes in clean energy firms. That's rather odd, isn't it? Startup companies. He's got a large care homes company. So he understands demographic reality, because if you're in care homes, you make sure you work out how much older are people going to be on average, how many more old people they're going to be, etc., etc. He's worth, last year, an estimated £30 million, including his 500-acre farm, a prime land in the highly expensive Cotswolds. So the man is not a mug, for all his faults. But here he is pretending he's going to be able to win in 2029. And to do that, he would have to take every single vote off of reform. He'd have to eliminate reform, and even then he might not win. He's got to do as well as Nigel Farage can at the best, with Nigel Farage in the way. It's utterly, utterly ridiculous. Held up only by basically fake opinion polls. The reality is that Farage is on about 25% of the polls and a bit behind the Labour Party, in front, well ahead of the Greens, well ahead of the Tories, and the others are on 6%. Now, the others will be significantly Rupert Lowe and Restore, but they include, so it's not the SNP, they're separate as well. So others includes Restore. It includes the Gaza Independence, the big Muslim bloc vote. It includes Corbyn's Your Party and all the crackpots. That's the others. So 6% isn't all Rupert Lowe, compared to 25% for Nigel Farage. And he's just pretending somehow he'll wave a magic wand, and this will be reversed within 3 years, potentially well less than that, and he's going to take every single vote off Nigel Farage. Crazy. So why? What's going on? You have to think he's either, it's not by accident, he's either very, very stupid, staggeringly stupid and arrogant to the point of senility, but he doesn't seem to be, or he's working for the Labour Party to split the right-wing vote, which is, if he did very well, is exactly what would happen, to let the Labour Party, Greens and the Islamists into power in a coalition. It's possible, but I would say it's very unlikely. I'll tell you this in the remaining few minutes. There's a far more realistic explanation. Go back to the rise of UKIP, Farage's party, now Reform. How did it rise? primarily, well, partly because of the European Union, the fact that the Brits didn't really like it, but primarily because of the BNP. Because the BNP that opened up British politics and forced the BBC to do the deal with Nigel Farage that they would promote him in order to block me and the BNP. That's why. But also, it's not the only way in which the BNP helped the rise of UKIP. And Farage is a very clever politician. He knew this. He knows it. The BNP also kept the left busy. They were so busy attacking us, trying to stop us, that they left UKIP basically alone. Furthermore, the BNP hoovered up all the proper radical nationalists who otherwise would have been tempted to go into UKIP. And it also hoovered up some real cranks and wackos and neo-Nazi crackpots. Got to be fair and honest about that. And if the BNP hadn't been there, a lot of those people would have thought, well, I don't really like UKIP, but I'm going to get involved because it's the best there is. So the BNP was fundamental to the rise to power of UKIP, Farage, and Reform. And yet, UKIP and Nigel Farage also destroyed the BNP. It's Nigel Farage's proudest boast that he stopped the BNP and destroyed it. Now, as I said, he's a very clever politician. He knows as a result of that, and he's known for some years, as a result of that, that cover had been lost. There's now no one to the right of UKIP who's any sort of a threat, or Reform, who's any sort of a threat. Therefore, the left are going to come for him. The BBC are going to come for him. And all the crackpots on the right are going to try and join him. And Hope Not Hate and so on will spot one, and they'll keep stum until that one turns up as a local councillor. And all of a sudden it's local councillor says blah, blah, racist, blah, blah, blah. And it affects the vote of a whole of a moderate, soft civic nationalist party. On top of that, Farage knows that his anti-immigration image is a fake. He knows very well his net zero immigration policy sounds great to ordinary Brits, but actually means that we keep the numbers steady for the good of the capitalist economy. Therefore, when 750,000 Brits leave the country in a year, which is what it'll certainly be, because it was over 500,000 last year, and the place is getting worse all the time. When 750,000 Brits leave in 2029-30, 750,000 Indians will be brought in to provide the cheap labour and the consumers, and to keep the house prices up. And that's Farage's policy. And he knows that if he gets in and then does that, that is going to recreate the far-right challenge on a mega scale, far, far more dangerous than the BNP ever was. And yet he's most proud of having blocked the BNP. And now he's on course to undo all of that and pave the way for the biggest, after he gets to power and sells out, to the biggest upsurge in far-right extremism in British history. Now, why on earth would he do that? How would he stop it? This, my friends, is how he would stop it. He would create his own controlled opposition, which would do a number of things. And this is what I'm talking about. This is Restore. Because Restore is there to do a number of things on behalf of Reform. It's there to corral the extremists, to keep them away from Reform so that they don't besmirch it, and also to keep us, the decent extremists, busy doing nothing, pretending they're going to win an election, perhaps getting involved in an election they cannot win. And it also keeps the left and the left's thugs off Reform's back. See, the left isn't out there just in order to hit the BNP or Reform or Restore. It's also a money-making operation. It's as simple as that. It's there to employ its people and, sorry, let's get rid of him as well, and to raise funds. It's simply a business. And if they haven't got anyone to attack, then there's no one to beg for donations to oppose. So they need an opposition, and Restore is going to provide that opposition. So further, this thing is wonderful. The gift that keeps on giving for Nigel Farage. It encourages the BBC to be relatively even-handed with Reform for fear of getting something worse. And furthermore, if they stand in the elections, Restore will put out leaflets and run candidates saying quite extreme things, which will raise public awareness and the temperature. But Farage knows full well that in the end, when people are in the ballot box thinking who am I going to vote for, they will, although they've been made to want to vote on an anti-immigration party, they'll think, but which is the serious party? Which is the credible party? I know they're a bit softer, but I'll vote for them because they might win. And in the end, if Restore make too much progress, Rupert Lowe owns it and controls it, and he's the nominations officer, and he can do a grand old Duke of York act, march his men up to the top of the hill and march them down again, and nothing will happen. And that is the purpose of Restore. And that is why Rupert Lowe is not organising them to build communities, and he's not putting effort into lawfare counterattacks, and he's not running a voter registration drive for the 8 million Brits who aren't even registered to vote. He's doing nothing except promising to win in 3 years' time. Rupert Lowe is a fake. He will fail, not because he's stupid, but because he's meant to fail. It's his job to fail. He's in cahoots with Nigel Farage and almost certainly with MI5 as well. And that is what is going on with this farce about Rupert Lowe, remigration and Restore. Right, as I told you, I haven't got an end slate. My apologies for that. I do hope that you will join me next week when I might have an end slate. Until then, please do remember to join Jim Dowson here on Purge TV tomorrow at 4 p.m, same time, same place, to join him for this very special Easter Sunday service, which will be really worth watching, and to come back and join me again, same time, same place, next week. Until then, please remember that all that is necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing. So I ask you from the bottom of my heart this very special week to make up your mind to get out there and do something really good. Des Volt, and God bless.